camera person is Carrie Laughlin, and our interviewer is Alex Ulmer. And today's date is
20th.
December 20th.
December 20th, thank you. 2003. Real fuzzy. Okay. So, what was your rank in the...
I was a buck sergeant, a three-striper.
And what was your job? What were you supposed to do?
Well, in the almost 4 years I was in the Army, I had a number of different things. You want a review of where I was? Started out enlisting in the Army because I would have been drafted anyway in September of 1942 in what was called the Enlisted Reserve. I was a student at the University of Nebraska, and that permitted me to finish that semester's school, and I was called active duty in February of the next year. First sent to Camp Roberts, California in basic infantry training. And I have a couple pictures of that over there I'll show you later. I never finished it. I had a phys ed degree and I'd worked in the bank here in Elmwood. And one day they called me out of ranks and I was interviewed by the police and prison officer. The stockade, there were, I suppose 20,000 men in that encampment, and someone would get in trouble. And they would be put in what was a military prison, though it was barbed wire and fence, not a big building. His responsibility when one came in was to take charge of their personal possessions. And the person who had been doing that for him had made a mistake or something and come up short, and he had to replenish it. So he told me, if you'll come over and do that, keep those books straight, you won't have to do anything else. And that sounded pretty good to me. I was a little tired of marching and drilling, and I did that for almost a year. And I had an MP band and a motorcycle. Was able to get home occasionally because any of the serious crimes would eventually be sentenced to Leavenworth Prison down in Leavenworth, Kansas. And being in the headquarters, I could sign on as a guard. Transportation being what it was, I didn't know where I was for a week or so, and I could come home. Briefly went to military government school in Battle Creek, Michigan, at Camp Custer. Found out after I got there that was preparing the occupation forces for Germany after the war was over. I was anxious to get back to school, and so I elected out of that and was sent to Camp Bowie, Texas, and trained with the 1285th Combat Engineer Battalion. This was mainly the Army's construction crew, and so the principal thing I did as a soldier would be similar to a construction foreman. And our outfit was specializing in Bailey bridges, which are a prefabricated steel structure made out of sections about 6 feet long and 4 feet high that 6 men can lift, and attached to the one head of it with a pin like that, and just keep going and shove it out until you get your bridge built. The principal significant thing that we did was to build the first and longest pontoon bridge across the Rhine River into Germany. And that's about it.
Did these bridges ever fail? Did they ever have to go rebuild them?
This scared me to death. We had that thing built and things were well coordinated, and here came a tank battalion with 40-ton Sherman tanks. And an officer got out and stood there and waved them on one at a time. And that whole bridge just went up and down like that, and I thought, sure, they're going to be in the bottom of the Rhine River. But they did not. He spaced them and apparently knew what the bridge could take. We lost a section out of it one night. The Germans still controlled the upper Rhine, and they cut a big barge loose that was loaded with coal. And at night it drifted into our bridge and took the middle out of it. Other than that, it survived, and having been around Europe and the Middle East a number of times, Since then, I still see those Bailey Bridge stresses that people are using here and there in backward places to build bridges.
So where did you live at the time when you enlisted in the Army?
Where did I live? Yeah, in Elmwood, Nebraska, but I was a student at the University of Nebraska.
And why did you pick the servants branch that you joined? Was there a specific reason?
I would have been drafted earlier, but I had had a bone disease as a child and was given a medical deferment. Then later on, partly out of patriotism, partly out of the fact that the country was needing men, and the story was, if you can see lightning and hear thunder, you can pass your Army physical. So I decided it was time to do something, and this opportunity to enlist in that particular section of the Army promised me one more semester of continuing my education before I'd be called, and it worked that way.
What do you remember about your first days in service? Were they like hard or?
Oh, yes, it's difficult for everybody. A bunch of us from the university were put on a train with orders to show up in Camp Roberts, California, which we did. Most of us had never, certainly me, seen the far western part of the country before, so it was an experience of learning and astonishment. And then we immediately began the basic training, which is the most difficult and severe. To learn to be a soldier, you're issued your uniform, go to a barrack, start learning how to be in and out of formation and take orders, and where you're supposed to stand and where you're supposed to sit, and just about everything you're supposed to do. Discipline is extreme. Physical conditioning was good. Out on the parade ground, we did calisthenics and we drilled before getting into actually firing the weapon and learning about that. First, you learn to care for it. The Army is very particular about that. Infantry detachment, of course, the principal weapon is the M1, which is brief for Model 1 Garand rifle, a 30 caliber, 8-shot semi-automatic. And you kept that clean with a toothbrush and oiled and shined, and if you didn't, you were in trouble.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
Not by name. I was only in that outfit about 2 months before I was moved, and then I moved again and again into different outfits, so no, I do not recall them specifically.
So what were the rations like that you ate during boot camp?
The rations in Camp Roberts were pretty good. We didn't think so at the time. You got a lot of goat stew, which was mutton, and that sort of thing, but this country had adequate food. Now overseas, of course, was a different thing. Everything was reserved foods, and when you were in the field, if the outfit was stable in one place, they would set up big pots in a line, and everybody had a mess kit. Are you familiar with a mess kit? It's a metal thing about the size of an oblong dinner plate that closes, has compartments. Inside is a metal knife, fork, and spoon. You'd go by and the mess sergeant would slop in whatever came by. When we weren't fortunate enough to be there, of course, it was Spam and hardtack or whatever you would carry when individual men were away from the kitchen.
Did you have clean water?
Yes. It doesn't taste good because it was doped up with, well, not Clorox, but whatever bug killer they put in it. But the outfit, and this again, of course, was when you were there, had a tripod hanging a big canvas bag with spigots on it that you could punch and fill your canteen. Where the water came from, I don't know. Then everyone was trained and learned, and it was not difficult for me to get by on that one canteen of water a day, which held not quite a pint. And you learn to conserve and to do things like that, and to carry your toilet paper in your helmet and have the things you needed with you.
Did you, how often a week would you say that you got to bathe?
How often did I what?
How often did you get to bathe, like a week, if you have to guess?
Well, I'll show you a picture over there of a man bathing using his helmet. I think I went probably 2 or 3 months without more than that kind of a quick sponge bath. Facilities weren't available. Even in France and Germany, we often bivouacked in just any bombed out house or school or church or wherever we could crawl in, rather than setting up temporary tents. But they'd all been bombed and utilities were gone. There wasn't that kind of an opportunity.
So did you kind of take advantage of these things before you went to enlisted in the war? You getting to bathe every day or so?
I didn't quite understand that.
Did you take advantage of the necessities that before you enlisted in the war that you got every day?
The necessities before I went to war?
Yeah.
Sure. Life was good. I belonged to the fraternity, and we had good meals there, and I was getting an education. Nobody had any money. This was just the end of the Depression, but I did. And after the war, of course, I was on the GI Bill, which was a provision to furnish student, not loans, but direct grants. I think I got $75 a month or something like that to use to continue my education.
And $75, that was good money back then?
My house bill, if I was returned, was $37.50.
Not like it is today, huh?
Things have changed a little bit, haven't they?
What do you think was probably your most memorable experience, if you have one?
Oh, there are a lot of them. There was one time, I was fortunate, the engineer outfit, at least the one I was in, it's not true of all of them. Many of them had to fight, and we all carried weapons, of course, and were trained to fight. But we always had infantry or somebody ahead of us, protecting us, that we were hand-to-hand or eye-to-eye with the enemy. But at one time I was given an assignment with a group of men for detached service. Headquarters was moving up, and this was across the Rhine, so we went over into a school that had been not bombed out too bad, that they wanted to use it for the office, the colonel's headquarters and so forth. Our job was to check it out for mines and booby traps, because the Germans, very frequently when they left a place like that, would leave it mined or put an explosive in a drawer so that you would blow your head off, that sort of thing. It didn't take us too long to do that, and the company commander had dropped us off at that, was to come back and get us. He didn't ever show up. There was a swimming pool attached to it, so a bunch of GIs sat around, looked around to see what they could find, and somebody found a big chug of cognac. Don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it's distilled wine. It's pretty strong stuff. So we were tasting that and having a happy time. But fortunately, we did have sentries out. One came up to me and he was poking 2 Germans on it. Said, "Hey, these guys want to give up, Sarge. What do I do?" I never did know where they came from or what happened. But anyway, we realized we were in the wrong spot. So we got organized and headed back down into the little town towards the river. And we were out as skirmishers. We did it properly, which means that following the road, one man is here, one man is here, one man is here, one man is here. So they can't get any number of you at one time. And the man next to me saw a bunch of trucks coming, and they went by, 4 men. He said, "Hey, Sarge, those guys are Germans." And we looked up, and sure enough, a whole outfit of Germans roared through, and they were as surprised to see us as we were to see them. These things happen when you have millions of men going back and forth, the lines are fluid. The lines had changed while we were up at the school. We were behind German lines. But we all took cover. They went on by, and our shot was fired. And went down and hid out by the river. The next morning, a battalion of U.S. tanks came in. And they were surprised to see us there too. They were chasing the Germans. But that was all there was to it. They had radio, which we did not have, and called back, and they sent assault boats across the Rhine, took us back around.
So did you ever fire your weapon in combat?
No, I did not. I carried I've got a couple to show you over there, but that was not what I used. I had the option of choosing my weapon, being a sergeant. And having been in the MPs, I had a Colt 45 automatic, which I could carry on the belt on my hip. And I lived with that thing on my hip for almost 3 years. Never had to fire it in anger. And that's fortunate because I couldn't hit anything. It's a big weapon, a heavy weapon, and good up to maybe 50 to 100 yards, but beyond that, it's useless.
Did you ever get any medals or citations?
Oh, just the standard stuff, and I don't even remember what they are. I do not have a Purple Heart. You had to bleed to get one of those. I have the standard battle stars from being overseas during the European theater.
Did you stay in touch with your family when you were overseas?
Did I contact the family?
Yeah.
Yes. Mail was sporadic and slow, as you can well imagine. But they had a system called email, where your letter was photographed down to about this size, the film sent by airplane, reproduced here and put in the mail to your family. And so there was some, but it would be a month or so at a time without any contact. And everybody understood that. They didn't know where I was, though I had a APO address, which all overseas outfits, the post office, I don't know what APO means, but it was the designation number for my outfit. And they would address me there, but of course, no one was supposed to know where we were. This is enemy information that was not to be disclosed.
Did they ever send you any food or packages or anything like that?
Not overseas. I think they did occasionally when I was still in the States.
So could you send packages overseas, or they just didn't?
The only thing that I sent back, and I don't have it, it got away from me, which I sorely regret, was a beautiful little double-barrel shotgun. One day we followed the troops into a town, and the fighters had gone on, and we lived back there, and there were still civilians around, so we were told to go through the town and collect all the arms, anything that would shoot, which we did, had a pile of them in the house that we had commandeered. I picked this thing out, and being in the engineers, we were in a truck outfit that had toolboxes and places you could stick souvenirs and things. So I got that in there, and then I kept it after the war was over. One of our duties was to supervise a wood factory that was making beds for displaced persons. The German workers ran the machinery, and we sat around and washed them a little bit, and I got them to make me a box, and was able to ship that shotgun home. Each weapon had one piece removed. We did this so they could not ever be used again. I didn't have the forearm guard, which is the thing that sits right there. And I took that to a man to have one made and didn't ever get it back.
Was there anything you did for good luck, or any rituals or something?
No. We basically thought we were indestructible. The man next to you is probably going to get it, but you aren't. But I guess I'm not a particular superstitious person.
How did people entertain themselves?
You didn't have time to do it. At least my outfit was busy. We worked and we did a number of bridge jobs and other related engineering jobs when we were overseas. When we were in the States, of course, there was a PX where you could go buy things and drink beer and play music. And there was a gymnasium, and on off hours you could get up a basketball game or do something like that. When I was in the MPs, it was delightful. I had that armband and a motorcycle. And I could come through the gate, come and go, and nobody questioned me. I'd ride over from Southern California, which I did frequently. It only took me an hour or so a day to, if new prisoners came in, to take their property and record it. Or if some were there and needed toothpaste or incidentals, I would go buy it for them and give it to them. So I had the best job in camp for a while.
So where exactly did you travel when you were in service? Like what countries or cities?
From Lincoln, Nebraska to California, from California to Battle Creek, Michigan to Fort Custer when I was in the military government school, back to California, back and forth to Leavenworth Prison in Kansas, not half a dozen times, but frequently, whenever we got a collection of real tough ones that we wanted to get rid of, the four of us would take them in handcuffs. And everything at that time, of course, was traveling by train, and it was a miserable ride, but I wanted to get back, so I did it because of the crowding. And with the prisoners, you had to stay awake, or some of the guards had to stay awake. It took 3 days. So I did that a number of times. Then from California to Texas, and after training there, we went from Texas to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and embarked. Went across the North Atlantic in a convoy, which was quite an experience. Submarines, the Germans were quite active, so they put a group of ships together, have destroyers out at the side protecting you. We didn't have any trouble. Just one day the destroyers let off some depth bombs, which, are you familiar with what they are? Big thing about the size of an oil drum that sticks in a cannon type thing. When they touch it off, it goes boom and rolls out, hits the water, can be set to discharge at a preset depth. And the concussion of that will supposedly get rid of the submarine.
Do you remember any humorous or some, funny things that happened to you during your service?
No, I don't have any humorous things. A couple of incidents that were very surprising. On May 8th, 1945, we were working on a bridge to the Belgian-German border at night. And we didn't keep office hours. When we had a job to do, we continued till it was done. The front was, maybe 3 or 4 miles ahead of us, far enough that you could hear the action, but not dangerous for us. And all at once they just surprised us. Everything went off. Flares went up. Guns went off. Tracers went into the air. Do you know what a tracer is? Every certain, I believe it's 7th round in a machine gun has a phosphorus coating. And you've seen this on television if you've watched it. You see it fly through the air and literally can see where your shot is going. So those, of course, were good fireworks. And we didn't know what was going on. It was the biggest battle of the war. But someone came back in a Jeep and we stopped and said, "What's going on up there?" "No, didn't you know the war's over?"
Do you remember the day your service ended?
Not the date. It was in late January of 1946 that I was home, because I remember that I was in law school and they had reopened the law school, and I entered, but the class had started in January, and I was about 3 weeks behind them. So that's as close as I suppose my discharge has a date on it, but I had numbers.
Were you discharged before the war ended, or?
No, but I was lucky again. After Germany collapsed, and we ran this bed-making factory and did a few other little jobs, we were moved to Marseille, France. And that was quite a trip, but we were a motorized outfit. Had our trucks and our bulldozer and everything with us, and went into camp there. And the Japanese war was still on, and our troops were preparing to invade Japan. I had only been overseas a little over 7, 8 months at that time, and they had a policy, which was fair as could be, that people who had been there the longest had got to come home first. The ones that didn't would be redeployed to Japan. And all of our trucks and equipment was loaded on freighters and took off. And we were to follow in a few days. And here again, I was sergeant of the guard one night and got my sentry's post and went to bed. The corporal came and shook me, "Hey, Sarge, get up, see what's going on." And here again, we were in an encampment that had combat troops all around. They still had their flares and ammunition. It was all going, and he said, "They dropped the atom bomb, the war was going to be over." And from there on, we didn't know what would happen, but we were put on the troop ship that was scheduled to go to Japan. And out on the Atlantic Ocean, they changed their orders and took us into New York. So I was extremely lucky to have, and I'm glad I did have the opportunity to serve in Europe, but I'm glad I didn't have to stay there, and I'm more than glad that I didn't have to go to Japan after the war was over, and I very well could have.
Did you make any friendships while in the service? Did you have any friends?
Oh, sure. There were 3 of us in my platoon, and a platoon is a unit in a company is a unit in a regiment is a unit in a division. So we were down at the smallest level. The sergeants had a command of a small group of men, and we were pretty close.
Do you continue any of these friendships today?
I've only seen one of those men in recent years. He turned up in Arizona, where we now go for the winter. Albert Robinson, the sergeant from Texas, and he's the only one I recall that I renewed. We were, as you can understand, a loose outfit that weren't attached to a division or anybody else. We were sent here and sent there. I did not develop close personal relationships with anybody except, well, a few, of course, in the company, but for that reason, I guess we never had a reunion or gotten back together.
How did your service and experiences affect your life after the war?
I think to a degree it did. You learn discipline. You learn how to take care of yourself. And every young man and woman should experience that. Every kid ought to have 2 years in the service. Because you develop habits that are good for you.
Not sure that one would pan out. Do you remember the day that you heard the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan?
Only because of that incident in Marseille, France, waiting for the debarkation to Japan. And I don't know how we got the news, but somebody did, and it spread right away, and everybody shot off everything they had and decided that the war was over.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
No, I think you've covered it real well. I do have some artifacts over here that you might be interested in. Can you set up over this way, or how
Yeah.
would you like to do it?
I'll just turn.
Can you get that?
Yep.
Okay. This was me in basic infantry training in Camp Roberts, California in 1943. That's the M1 Garand rifle with a bayonet on it. I have one right here I'll show you. And that's my canteen. You wore a cartridge belt. The side view shows your pack. The bayonet was sticking in there, and that was a handy thing to have. You could dig with it and cut food with it and so forth. That's a trenching tool. It's a small shovel that folds. And the first thing you did, if you were under fire, was dig a foxhole, get down underground. And then the pack itself carried whatever you wanted to put in it. But if you were in the field, you'd have one half of a shelter, which was a pup tent, they called it. Two men would put it up and have protection from the weather. And then possibly some clothes, possibly some food, depending on where you were going and what you were doing. Those are not combat boots. When we went overseas, we were issued excellent shoes that were leather clear up to there. Now here is how we ate when we were in the field. If you were fortunate enough to be where you could get to the kitchen, they'd line up those and put the food in them, and you'd walk by and they'd throw in your pan, and then you'd go over and find a place to eat it. And we were always, of course, around our trucks and all of our equipment. If you had time, once in a while somebody'd give you a haircut. That's what's going on there. Of course, we'd chase the Germans out of a lot of places, and we didn't hesitate to liberate something if we thought we wanted it. That's the Burgermeister's outfit. The Burgermeister is the mayor of a German town. And I said we didn't have any fun, but we did have a little. Somebody found that and dressed himself up as the German mayor. And you asked about a bath. That's the way you took a bath. It was a little hot, not hot, probably cold water in his, you can't see the helmet, but there's a tin helmet there. You went ahead and bathed. I don't know if you want these or not, but I put them out here for you. The bridge we built was near Cologne, Germany. So I got in there. Actually, this was the bridge that went across the river just above Dusseldorf to Cologne. And I don't know whether we had bombed it and destroyed it to inconvenience the Germans, or whether they had demolished it after they went back across it. But our bridge was just downriver from that a little ways. So I was in and out of Cologne some. This is a very famous cathedral. That's the way it was before we got there. That's the way it was afterwards. But actually, the Air Force did a good job of trying to preserve it. You see what the rest of the town looked like. And of course, that was common. German was rubble, total rubble, any place that was significant. That's one way we won the war, was destroying their capacity to produce war material by aerial bombing. But at that time, the B-17s would go over, I'm not sure what their bombing height was, but several miles in the air, using the Norden bomb site, which was touted to be very accurate. But they'd drop a string of bombs and it might run for a quarter of a mile, being that high, varying winds, and not exact targets. So a lot of stuff got knocked down. And I think that's the most of that. This is shrapnel. This is from a pretty big shell. I don't know what it is, but from the thickness I can see it is. Do you know how a shell is built? Okay. These are smaller over here, but I'll show you one. Oh, okay.
I'll turn.
I don't know what this is exactly. I think it's probably an anti-aircraft because of its size. You notice it's threaded in there. The fuse goes in there and can be set to go on impact, or if it was an anti-aircraft shell, it would be set to go up at about what elevation they thought the airplane was. Then this cast iron all fragments and blows out, covering probably a 50-yard circle or more, that jagged stuff flying through the air. These are some smaller rounds. This is a casing from a 75mm cannon. And it, of course, had a pretty good nose on it. Generally, they had three types of projectiles. One was anti-personnel, which was set to detonate in the air above troops, and again would throw the shrapnel all over them. Another was armor piercing, to use against tanks. It was a hard steel casing, and wouldn't always penetrate them. Usually it'd blow the tracks off. You know, they're similar to a bulldozer with tracks, and that was the vulnerable part of a tank. And the third is demolition, set to go through a building or into a building or underground and then go off and blow everything up. Now I have two rifles here. This one belongs to the American Legion, and it is the M1, just M1's what we call it. The total title is Model 1 Garand, named after the man by the name of Garand who invented it. It's an 8-shot semi-automatic. And the clip, these are blanks because we use this rifle to salute veterans when they die. You stick it right down in there and squeeze them down in. And then you can, it'll put one in the chamber, and you can fire 8 of those. Each time you fire one, the gas chamber here forces the bolt back. It ejects the shell and throws another one into the chamber. I qualified as an expert with this because I could hit a bullseye a few times out of 8 at 500 yards. That's a little over a quarter of a mile, and that's about the effective range of this weapon, but that's also about as far as you can see a target clearly. There are other sniper weapons with telescopic sights that would do better than that, but this is the standard weapon. There were millions of them. Everybody used them, not just the infantry. Practically every man was armed with one or with some sort of weapon. And of course, the first thing you learned in boot camp was how to handle it. They'd have you come to attention. Then if you were to move, they would get the rifle up on your shoulder by saying right shoulder, arms. They would say it this way, right shoulder, arms. That would give you, listen up, something's coming. And then everybody would do it in 4 motions. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're ready to go. Bring it down was order arms. Order, arms. 1, 2, 3, 4. That weighs 8 pounds, and it's a lot heavier than it was when I was a young man. I could do that snappily then. Now this other weapon is a Japanese rifle. My sister, and it's interesting, was a woman's Army service pilot, one of the few women that flew military planes during the war. They were disbanded before the war was over because enough men were then available. And she joined the Red Cross and was working for the Red Cross in the Philippines at the end of the war. And being a woman Red Cross worker, she was able to get some good stuff home. And this is the rifle that the Japanese used. You see, it has a little longer barrel, a little smaller caliber, a little higher muzzle velocity, but it's a bolt action. And the soldier had to pump it each time himself. It was not semi-automatic like ours, but it was a good weapon. And I made the mistake of giving this to the State Historical Society, wanted to bring it down here to show it to you, and I almost had to go to the governor to get it away from him. And then they brought it in a big box, all wrapped up carefully, and said, that's been perfectly restored, and it has, I guess, there's no rust or anything on it. Would you please wear gloves so that you don't get fingerprints on it that might etch into the metal? So I said that I would, and I'll have to take that back next week. But that's one of the nicest artifacts around here. Too many of those around. Now, of course, I'm very proud of my sister, who's now deceased. There she is with another Women's Army Service pilot inspecting an airplane before they took it off. And she's the second from the left. She trained in B-17s, which was unusual. Not too many of the girls did. And she also flew a number of other bombers. She sent these postcards home and said that she flew each of these. That's the B-17, of course, the four-engine that was the principal bomber before the B-29. It came out just at the end of the war. This is a C-29 Tokyo Raider, which was really a converted B-25. Do you know about the Tokyo Raiders? The war was early on, and we wanted to give Japan a little dose of something, but we didn't have the facilities to really do it. So they trained a special crew of men and flew these off of a carrier, if you can imagine that. A short runway, but they were able to get them into the air and bomb Japan. Dick Joyce, who lived in Lincoln and was a partner in Hinkle and Joyce Lumber Company, was one of them. I was fortunate enough to go to two different antique aircraft shows with him, and he talked about doing it. He said they didn't get as close to Japan as they had intended because they ran into a Japanese fishing boat and were afraid that they had been disclosed, and they didn't dare risk taking the carriers any closer to the homeland of Japan. So they had to immediately take off, which was all right. They got to Tokyo and bombed it. By then it was night, and they headed for China, but did not have enough fuel to get to their intended destination. And the whole fleet, fuel to get the nation. And the whole fleet that happened to them ran out of gas at night over China. So they jumped out in their parachute, and he said after about 2 weeks that they were in friendly country. They got connected up with some British outfit that was there and finally got back home. And this is a C-72 Lockheed Hudson bomber. There were not as many of these used. I don't know much about it, but that was one more plane that Betty flew.
And what was your sister's rank?
I'm sorry?
What was your sister's rank?
Her name was Betty Clements, born and raised in Elmwood, a tremendously capable girl. All of these women were exceptional women. Over 25,000 girls applied for this training. They had to have had some flight training. That's Betty right there. Only 1,250 eventually graduated and were Army service pilots. But they had a grand time. They were a good bunch of girls, and this, of course, is the book from her training class. A bunch of pictures of what they were doing. This was in Sweetwater, Texas, that they trained. And she had one distinction that she never talked about. I have a little of it because of that newspaper article. She became a medical doctor and was a neurologist in Phoenix, Arizona, before her death. And she mentions in there when she was flying with the Colonel Tibbetts group in Wendover, Utah. That was the group that was training to drop the atom bomb. And security was so tight that she never talked about it. And let's see, that's about everything I have here. There's General Eisenhower greeting the troops just before D-Day. And some newspaper clippings. This is important to me. It's a picture of my cousin Keith Clements, who was just 2 years younger than I, born and raised in Elmwood, graduate of Elmwood High School, became a platoon leader, which is a second lieutenant in the Combat Engineers, and was killed by the Japanese in the Philippines. Been a pleasure. Anything else I can do for you?